Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The prep work has been done. We've taken deep dives into all these SEC programs, and now we're ready to take a look at our 2023 SEC Power Rankings. Now, before we get into it, again, just want to say thank you to you guys for all the support you guys have shown. We learned a ton from you guys when we did our deep dives into these SEC programs. And now, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And even more importantly, we're about to stack these teams. It's going to make some people upset. I love it. Let us know in the comment section what you guys think. We'll chop it up there. Again, I don't even know. Dylan and I have talked a little bit about this, but it's going to be a little bit off the cuff. There's going to be some debate. I don't even know if Dylan and I are on the same page with their SEC power ranking. So again, let us know in the comment section what you guys think. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you on one that I think we're both going to agree on. Who you got as the number one team in the country or in the SEC?
Well, both the Georgia Bulldogs. They've kind of wrested control of the college football world from Alabama and Clemson, if you will. They do feel like the consensus one. They're tough every year. They're getting to the point they lose the guys they lose first round draft picks, so forth. They're just recruiting in such a way. Kirby Smart's got the attitude and the culture in such a way. This team, until you prove that you can beat the Bulldogs consistently, they're
I don't even know if anyone would argue with this. It's seems like a very difficult spot to argue that Georgia's not the number one team, not only SEC but in the country. And even as a Michigan fan, I went back and watched the Georgia spring game and was give me some hope that it could be Michigan's year. Maybe Carson Beck doesn't look ready. Carson Beck looked really good in that spring game. And Carson Beck can play. And even more importantly, I think I could operate that offense. That offensive line is elite. You have some weapons on the outside, guys like Brock Bowers, Dominic Lovett coming in. And obviously the defense is one of the best, if not the best in the country. The Georgia Bulldogs, the number one team in the SEC. Now, Dill, this is where the discussion gets a little passionate. Dill, the number two team in the SEC, probably sticking in that elite category. Who are we going with?
I got the LSU Tigers, but I could be convinced both ways. I think LSU, what they did, I think they got a lot better just overall. I think the young talent they had last year, you saw the development over the course of the year.
Yep.
I think you add a bunch of guys in the transfer portal who I really like. And this is a team that last year beat Alabama with Bryce Young. And Bryce Young's gone. He was the best player on that Alabama team, I would say. Maybe you could argue Will Anderson or Dallas Turner, but he was driving that offense. I think this LSU team got a little better. Second year with Kelly. I don't know.
So I got two takes on this. I got my brain take after taking deep dives into both these programs. LSU beat Alabama last year. They got better during this offseason. They hammered the transfer portal. And like you said, year 2 under BK, you feel better about this LSU team heading into 2023. And in my dome, LSU is the better team than Alabama heading into 2023.
But the college football feel, and I think this is where you're going.
In the gut.
I still feel it still feels like Bama. And Nick Saban's kind of going to, at least I listened to an interview of him today. He said he's throwing it back. We're going to start being physical again. We're going to be a tough team. And when Saban's doing that, you know how.
And they're going to have a really good offensive line. They're going to play those 2 tight end sets with Tommy Rees coming in, and it's going to be I know the defense, by the way, is going to be phenomenal. That defense is truly loaded. If you follow recruiting, some of the young cats they have, that's going to be a really good unit. I think a lot of the questions are on the offense side of the ball, specifically that quarterback spot. Tommy Rees, I think, is going to make it really easy on whoever's playing quarterback. They're going to run the football. They have a phenomenal offensive line. They got a staple of really good young backs. So, I'm okay. Officially, the Rock Boys are going with LSU. We feel horrible about it. Makes me want to puke. Bama's still in that elite category. I'd still probably have them as a top 5 team in the country. Still, after these 3 teams, I think you take that step down the tier. Who we rocking with at the competitive tier?
Now, this is, again, I think it's Tennessee personally, and I think Tennessee is working their way into that elite category where year in and year out, it's going to be more of a toss-up with a Bama LSU type team or maybe Georgia at some point, but I don't think they're there yet. I still think Heupel's got some work to do to put together his scheme and his culture, and And again, it's coming. Like Nico's coming, but just losing Hooker and some of those offensive weapons, I do have some questions. Can they be as potent on offense? And I do still think they're building that defense up. So I think they're a year or two away from being in that elite category. But I mean, obviously last year they were. I just think maybe a year off.
This Tennessee team's going in the right direction. And I kind of echo what you said. And for me, it's just Joe Milton's got to prove it to me over a course of a season.
Heupel knows how to develop quarterbacks.
No, 100%. Like, I'm not out on like Tennessee fans. As a Michigan guy, like I've seen the worst of Joe Milton. Like bad Joe Milton. And Tennessee fans have seen elements of Joe Milton that haven't been great either. And so I think there's a fair amount of Tennessee fans that are like, all right, Joe Milton's got to put it together consistently over the season. That was something Hendon Hooker, like people took for granted. Hendon Hooker never missed throws, never turned the ball over. Joe Milton, as cool as it is with that big arm, is a little bit more inconsistent over his career.
That's what we've seen, but Michigan didn't have Josh Heupel. Josh Heupel took a Hendon Hooker who could barely start on Virginia Tech, according to Justin Fuente.
Yeah, that's why.
And made him a Heisman contender. So it's like, I'm not ready to say like Josh Heupel can't do that, and this Tennessee team can't be right in that elite category with what they're
100%. And even outside of like Joe Milton, like Cedric Tillman, I think a healthy Cedric Tillman is one of the best SEC running wide receivers in the country. Jalen Hyatt as well. Like Darnell Wright, like they lose a lot of guys. So Tennessee comfortably, I think that number 4 team. I just am not ready to put them up at that elite tier. Now, Dill, who we got at this next time, that number 5 spot in the SEC here?
I think I have the Razorbacks, and I know it's really tight with Texas A&M, frankly, for me. But just given how much better I think the quarterback play will be, along with Rocket Sanders, who I think might be the best back in the conference, I think this time I give this Hogs team a slight edge. I think they fixed the secondary, which they obviously needed to do in the portal. I like what this Arkansas team is going to have coming into this year.
All right, I'll give you that. Like KJ Jefferson is, when he's playing his best ball, he's maybe the best quarterback in the SEC. Like when he is playing his best football, my concern is like I think they're going to be able to run the football. You got Rocket Sanders, KJ Jefferson, that Sam Pittman Bill offensive line. Their wide receivers are just have me completely confused. They took a bunch of group of 5 guys, one guy from the Division II level. That secondary was so weak last year, and I get they made it better. I don't know if they made it good enough. Like this was a team that won 7-6 last year with the bowl game over Kansas. I'll let you guys
need to prove it to me though on offense. Like again, I like what they do with Petrino coming in, but they're going to need to prove that offense is fixed because it's been a little bit of time now that it just has not been.
And I'm like this similarly like to the Alabama, like this Texas A&M team's got my brain in a pretzel. Like they were so bad last year, but you look at that depth chart and what they have on paper. It's such a loaded team.
And it was young, and if they make big improvements, this team is going to be a handful for probably anyone in this conference.
I guarantee you polled Georgia, and you say outside of LSU and Alabama, who's that one team you don't want to play? If Kirby Smart wouldn't say this, I think Brian Kelly would say this. So let's pull Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly, outside of Georgia and Bama, who's that one team that you would not want to play right now? I think a lot of coaches would answer the Texas A&M Aggies because of how talented they are. Maybe Tennessee, but I think Texas A&M deserves to be up there. And again, it's a team that needs to put it together. But if they do, man, this team is going to be absolutely fun to watch. Now it gets hairy again, going down to the contender. Or Dill, do you have? I guess I should ask. Do you have any teams that should stay up into that like competitive?
I don't think so. I think Ole Miss and Auburn might be floating on the fringe of it, but I don't try again. Ole Miss is tough because they do probably have, if Jackson Dart takes a step, they're probably right up there in terms of quarterback play in this conference. And you saw some magic from Jackson Dart. You also saw some really poor decisions, and they can't afford to turn the ball over like that because I don't think this defense is going to be like world beater, so they can't have possession stolen from them. But Lane Kiffin, probably one of the best offensive minds I've ever seen. In Jackson Dart, they might be there, but I just think talent like across the board isn't quite up to snuff.
Jackson Dart is getting some first round buzz in mock drafts, and I like talent wise, I think he's there. Like you look at some of the plays, the athleticism, the arm that he has. Like you said, it's just about putting together and the consistency. Though we said KJ Jefferson could be the best quarterback, I think there's a really good argument Jackson Dart is too. So I'll have Ole Miss at that number 1 team, the number 7 team in the SEC. And you got the Auburn Tigers coming in next. And I think this will have, it's no secret, both the boys are very high on Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers heading into 2023. Dale, it's your pitch for the Auburn Tigers.
I could have Auburn over Ole Miss. I think what Auburn did in the portal, in just being, I think, a team that might be physically very hard for Ole Miss to match up across the board with. Because you look, Auburn, I mean, transformed their offensive line, and it looks really good.
100% agree.
I think they have a quarterback, if they can run the ball, in Peyton Thorne, he can be effective to an extent that they haven't really seen in a few years. And I think just the portal talent overall was so deep, and I think Hugh Freeze is such a good coach, along with the fact that the bones of that defense has been really good and it looks really good. I think you could argue it. I do think this is like really splitting hairs between these two teams, and maybe just my perception is Auburn, but I don't know. It'd be hard for me to say them over Ole Miss, but I could.
All right, if it's hard for you, I think we're gonna stick. I'm gonna work my magic here. Ole Miss first. I just trust the quarterback play a little bit more, and I get very high on Auburn. I think they're gonna be a solid team 2024, 2025. Just like Payne Thorne, Robbie Ashford. There's a lot of question marks there. I think Ole Miss has a lot better of a quarterback situation. Now, Dill, I'm gonna take the reins here, and I this is like one of the times during the offseason where you gotta like plant your stake in the ground, I should say. Give me the Missouri Tigers as being a contender, competitive team in the SEC. This is a team that has a phenomenal defense that returns a lot from last year. I think Tyron Hopper, one of the best linebackers in the SEC. I think arguably the second best offense, maybe after Alabama, LSU. One of the top offensive lines in the SEC. The one question mark is that quarterback spot. Right? And I think it's a good problem to have. You have Brady Cook that provides you Brady Cook was a solid SEC quarterback last year. He wasn't great, but he wasn't bad. Then you bring in Jake Garcia, former top 50 national dude from the Miami Hurricanes. You have a young Sam Horn. I think this Missouri Tigers team has a chance to go 8-4 and be one of those teams that everyone takes a look at come early November and be like, that team can play some football. So I'm putting Missouri Tigers in there. Now I'll let you kind of like respond and then to provide your next team here.
Now this is like maybe my head's telling me like Mizzou might be a little bit more of a complete team, especially across the two sides of the line of scrimmage. But with what South Carolina and Spencer Rattler put together at the end of the year, I don't know. There's something there. I just think Rattler is far better than any quarterback on that Mizzou roster. I don't even think it's frankly close. I like what Beamer's doing. The question will be, can they bang on both sides of the line? And that might be such a deficiency right now it's being corrected in the recruiting, but it might be a bit of a deficiency this year. It does make it hard to say them over Mizzou, but man, it's just they had some magic going. If they can carry that on, that's going to be a tough team.
I feel like a lot of South Carolina fans like got mad at us for when we did our deep dive eval on South Carolina, and like I'm a huge fan of this team. It's just I got some question marks on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I mean, it was a team that struggled last year, especially on the defensive line, stopping the run, and then you lose a guy like Pickens, you lose a guy like Jordan Burch. I am very high on Spencer Rattler. I think there's another strong argument that he could be the best SEC quarterback in the conference this year. I think there's some problems that will kind of rear their ugly head along the trenches, and it is really hard to win football games in the SEC when you can't stop the run.
You saw that early in South Carolina season, and I'm not sure Rattler got he is who he is, but like that offensive line did start to play a little bit better, and he looked really good. But just across the whole season, the play wasn't nearly good enough, and I don't know why you would expect it to necessarily get so much better this year. It's not like they hammered the portal with like stars like Auburn did. It's just, I don't know. You're right, but in my gut, I'm like South Carolina, Rattler, maybe.
Yeah, no, 100% see that point. No, I'm already thinking about, do you have any other teams that you'd put in this same tier, or are we working down to the next tier here?
I mean, that's where it
gets hairy. I don't know.
Kentucky could possibly be right there with those two
100%
teams.
agree. I think Florida could be right in there too.
And I think you probably make a bit of an argument for Mississippi State because of Will
Yeah.
Rogers. He's just
Harry,
really
I'll
good.
do what I know what to do right now. Vanderbilt, hey, team's getting better, but maybe 2024. Now, Dill, we got 3 more teams to stack in this tier rankings. Where are we going here? What team you want to talk about at least?
See, what I almost think you could do is you could take off Mizzou and Carolina and bump them to the lower tier and leave Auburn and Ole Miss alone. But those 7 teams are really hard to differentiate. I think I have Kentucky next just because they do have their culture in place. I think they typically play good defense. I love that Liam Cohen's coming back because he is I just don't think they have
100% agree with that. I think that's big. And this
offensive line needs to be better, though. They'll say that. It wasn't even close, and that's a team that when they're good, their offensive line can play. They were weak last year.
Was exactly what I was going to say. I think that team is a dangerous team in the SEC if they can protect Will Levis last year. That offensive line was an absolute joke, and you never see that from Coach Stoops' team. Like, you never see that offensive line. That's for a while, Kentucky was winning football games because of how dominant their offensive line was, and it was just so bad. And again, what I'll say is Devin Lear is a guy who's already struggled with injuries during his time at NC State, so like they got to keep him protected. It has to get better. If it is better, like Barry and Brown, Dane Keys, like they got some absolute dogs on the outside. So we'll see. We'll see what Kentucky looks like, Dill. I think the next team, and again, this is a team I think we could be coming late October, early November talking about Florida being one of the better teams, like being a surprise team, right? But as of right now, especially guys from the Big Ten, it's like, you trust Graham Mertz to go down and consistently win games, especially with how bad how tough their schedule is. This is a team that's going to be filled with young talent, with the transfer quarterback that hasn't necessarily been great at his first stop. I think there's just too many question marks for me to be saying like they're one of the stronger teams in the SEC at this point. Although y'all know, like I'm a Florida Gators guy. Like,
I mean, that's a team that you're just kind of looking to the future. They're gonna play with a bunch of freshmen, a bunch of sophomores, and it's like super talented, probably more talented than those 3 teams like Kentucky, Carolina, and Mizzou.
They might be 100%.
But I think at the end of the day, I don't have a ton of confidence in Graham Mertz. I don't know that they're going to be good enough everywhere else to kind of deal with that right now. But again, these freshmen, if they're already a kind of rock and roll, they're going to be really hard to beat because that talent wise, they're going to be up there closer to the top than they are to the bottom.
100%. I think we all agree that Florida's going in the right direction. It just might be a year away. Last team, Mississippi State, and obviously just super unfortunate team to talk about. They're switching up kind of a lot about this program. And I think
when you lose a head coach in the way they did it, that's really hard, especially a guy who's so unique and so good at what he does. And I don't doubt what they're going. I like that they kept Arnett in the culture in place to an extent, but I do think you're dealing with a coach in Coach Leach who is just so good. And I think in a sport that the head coach matters so much, like college football, it does feel like, again, that they might take a step back. But I will say Will Rogers is incredible.
Will Rogers is a gamer, and a lot of people say he was just a product of that scheme. I don't agree. Like Will Rogers can play. I'm kind of at the point where it's just you're going from like this air raid to like more of a balanced attack, and it's hard to see there not being significant growing pains as this like new regime kind of comes in.
Especially losing a fair amount of talent in the portal and not necessarily reloading it, although recruiting seems like it is going okay. And again, I don't doubt I do like keeping Arnett. I didn't think it would have been a good idea to fire everybody and kind of reshuffle the deck, if you will, but there is something. Mike Leach was just so good at what he did. So good. And when you lose him, it will be tough, I think, to kind of sustain what they had.
All right. There we have it. I think looking back at it, like I love the first tier. I think I like the second tier. Arkansas, that seems a little high for me. And then we basically just threw a button. Like you could argue like Florida could beat Ole Miss on any game. Florida could be like any of these teams on any given day outside of
Mississippi State, even with that quarterback play, it's like they're going to be hard to beat just because I do think they're going to be able to score when you have a quarterback who plays that well. It's like the UNC North Carolina thing. That team is not great around them, but Drake May is awesome. Will Rogers is really good. I do think that you probably put them up in the contender category just because of that. I mean, again, I don't think the team around it is necessarily there, but he's awesome.
Boom. No looking out. Let's move Vanderbilt up one.
We'll just delete a category.
We'll delete maybe in 2024. That was a little mean to begin with. There you have it. Again, let us know in the comments section what you guys think. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys as usual, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.